Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank the Jewish Board for Advocates for Children for inviting the State's Attorney's Office here to address you all. I also, hearing both from Mark Weiss and Penny Taub, are events that we hear through our office all too often. And the one underlying message, if I may, is how important it is to report instances of abuse, instances of sex abuse. There are certain entities that are mandated reporters, and you may know this depending on where you all are coming from in your different worlds. If you're a teacher, if you're a healthcare professional, if you're a psychologist, psychiatrist, foster parent, you are a mandated reporter. You have to report if you believe within your professional capacity that there is a sexual or a physical abuse occurring to a child. You have to report to the DCFS hotline. Okay, that's the Department of Children and Family Services, 1-800-25-ABUSE. What happens once those abuses are reported is the law enforcement agency gets involved as well. Okay? There are different ways in which we get cases at the State's Attorney's Office, and for purposes of this particular presentation, I'm going to focus primarily on child victims, victims under the age of 18, but really targeting those children under the age of 13, and there are many. We have within Cook County places called Children Advocacy Centers. Is anyone out there familiar with child advocacy centers? Okay, I see a few hands. They are a wonderful, wonderful forensic opportunity for many disciplinary entities to talk to that child, interview the child, and see what needs to happen with respect to a child. Let me just give you, for instance, what happens if a child abuse hotline is called in. When a hotline call is placed, DCFS will go out and do a preliminary interview. An agent from DCFS will do a preliminary interview to see if there's an immediate danger within that house that has to occur to take protective custody of that child. If there is no immediate danger, they will schedule an interview and get together with law enforcement at a child advocacy center. These child advocacy centers are there's one in Northbrook, Rolling Meadows, Bridgeview, and then there's the Chicago Advocacy Center located at Roosevelt and Damon. What happens when a child is brought to the Child Advocacy Center is an interview is conducted, only one interview, not 5 interviews, but just one interview of that child by a specially trained forensic interviewer. That person is tasked with trying to determine from the child what happened, okay, what occurred. They're asked, and these forensic interviewers are trained to speak with someone who's 3, 4, 5, 11, 12, 13 years old, on up to 18 years old. There's just the child and the forensic interviewer in a room. In another room, outside a two-way mirror, is law enforcement, our office, the State's Attorney's Office, and the Department of Children and Family Services. And we're observing that interview. And the reason we're observing that interview is to see what, with this multidisciplinary team, it is that we need to extract information from through this forensic interview. What's happening? What are the charges that could possibly be brought in this case? What are the dangers to that child? What else do we have to ask in follow-up questions through that forensic interviewer? Once that forensic interviewer speaks with the child, he or she will come out to our room where we're seated and ask us, is there anything further we need to ask of this child? Is there something further we need to know? For our purposes, the State's Attorney's Office, we need to know where all of these different abuses occurred, because all too often it's not just one abuse that occurred at one time. As you've heard from both Mr. Weiss and Mr. Taub, they can be repeated times by an alleged offender. And again, as indicated by Mr. Taub, most times with children, it's somebody they know. somebody they know, a person in trust or authority many times with these children. And they are groomed beforehand. And these predators know that, and they rely on the child's devotion is the wrong word, but trust in that person that they're not going to do anything bad to them. And so they're groomed for a while with this. But it's important for us to understand every single time that that perpetrator has harmed the child or assaulted that child in some way, because each of those separate times could be separate charges. That could mean an increased penalty for that, but it's also important for us for charging purposes so that we know the proper charges are being brought. Our part, once the case is brought through the system, the child is interviewed. There are additional investigations that go on by law enforcement. Our office reviews the case once law enforcement has completed the investigation on a particular case. So one part of it is the interview of a child. The other part is, again, very important, is the outcry. Some people call it fresh complaint, but it's that immediate person. Who did that person outcry to? Who did that child tell this for the first time? And in what circumstances did that occur? It's very important because the courts have allowed what we call 11510 out-of-court statements to come in. What that means is the courts have decided that children under 13, if the time, content, and circumstances of that making of that statement bears indicia of reliability, those statements should come in as evidence. Those should come in as evidence. And they do come in as evidence. And so that's why it's very important that we look at that very first outcry. And it's so important to have that outcry as soon as possible to the event or events. Because as time goes on, and I don't know how many of y'all are fans of, CSI, New York, and Dallas, and all that, and they all have the magic potions that do amazing things, which I wish we had, because that's just not how evidence really occurs. But the longer time passes from the time of event, the more difficult it is to gather evidence, for law enforcement to gather evidence. So if I may echo what has been said here before, the quicker and the sooner you can make the complaints to law enforcement, to the Department of Children and Family Services, the quicker entities can come in and assist in that child's trauma. Within the Child Advocacy Center, apart from the forensic interview, there's a medical team that does a medical examination. There are mental health professionals that are there to assist the child and the family going forward. There are advocates that assist with the courts in terms of if the case does go to court, to try to assist and usher that case and the family through the court systems, so it's not such a mystery and a black hole as has been mentioned previously. One of the things I brought with me today is the Parent Handbook, A Guide to Helping Your Child Heal, and it's put out by the Chicago Children's Advocacy Center. There are some other documents that are out there as well from the advocacy centers, as well as what we give our victims that have several hotline numbers, again, to support the victims of these sexual abuses and assaults, whether they're children or adults. It's important for them to have as many resources as possible to support them through this very, very difficult reliving and traumatic time. So to the extent that you can support them, we can support them. Whether the case goes forward or not, we will try to do that, because it's a tremendous burden and trauma that they have to carry through. If there's ever any questions, and again, I just wanted to focus it on the child advocacy part of it. If you ever have any questions, I also have cards, business cards here too. Please feel free to call our office. Anita Alvarez has taken great steps in trying to ensure that these victims of sexual assault, we just recently added a specific assistant to deal only with acquaintance sexual assault cases, and those are You may have heard of them as date rape type instances that do occur, especially with our adolescent population. And so we have a prosecutor that is dedicated only to those types of cases, as well as a state's attorney who's dedicated only to victims between the age of 13 and 18, because again, that is such a difficult age and population. So if you ever have any questions, please feel free to call. We'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.